Even experts err occasionally. And when they do, everyone is left wondering how it could happen, because some errors are more serious than others. Some errors result in the loss of life and only cause suffering in their wake. This is the story of Rosa King, a seasoned zookeeper who worked with huge cats while adhering to strict safety protocols. Yet one day, King appeared to forget a vital detail, and the mistake cost King her life. She was killed by a Malayan tiger without nobody around to observe it happen. This is Wild Assault. Hit the like button and subscribe. On May 29, 2017, around 9:38 in the morning, the Hamerton Zoological Park was about to welcome visitors and open its gates for the day. But a few minor elements needed to be reviewed and fixed before the public could access the zoo. Rosa King, 33, made her way to the tiger enclosure. King was a 13-year-old zookeeper with a lot of experience. King had been the head of the zoo's carnivore section for 8 years at that point, working closely with all types of large cats. She adored and was highly close to the animals. When one of them died, King felt as though she'd lost a buddy. Rosa was always willing to go to any length to help the animals survive. Yet she also knew that any of the cats could easily overwhelm her and murder her. As a result, Rosa King was extremely concerned about her safety. Not only was she knowledgeable of all the safety protocols, but she would frequently train people in tiger cage safety. She repeatedly emphasized the need of never entering any area of the feline enclosure. If a large cat was around, everyone knew Rosa King was trustworthy and concerned about her protection. That may have added to the mystery and sadness of the events of the day. If something like this could happen to someone so focused and well-trained, it could happen to anyone. And, as it turned out, it could have, at least in some ways. Rosa King put in a lot of effort. Her summer working hours were 45 hours per week, 6 days per week. Nonetheless, King's schedule had been more hectic than normal. That was in May. By May 29, the date of the heinous occurrences, she'd worked 9.5 hours of overtime, possibly more. King had volunteered to care after a zoo kitten who had been abandoned by its mother. It was typical of King to give up her free time to nurse an animal back to health or assure its safety. Since she was 2 years old, the woman had demonstrated an interest in working with animals and had worked hard to make her dream a reality. She was now the head of the zoo's carnivore section, and she was as devoted to her work as she had always been. Rosa King spent nearly the whole month of May 2017 waking up many times at night to feed the survival kit. Despite the fact that she was mostly cheery, King's co-workers noticed she was tireder than normal. Still, she had a job to complete, and it was a straightforward one at 9:38 a.m. on May 29, 2017. She was required to go into the tiger enclosure and clean the windows. This is the Malayan tiger that lives in the enclosure and has a tendency of peeing on the glass. This made it more difficult for the public to see the cat. Thus, keepers at Hamerton Zoo Park were constantly required to keep the windows clean. In order to enter into the tiger enclosure, a safety mechanism was installed. The keepers had to follow it and ensure that every puzzle piece fit. To put it another way, the keepers were personally accountable for their own safety. The enclosure was secured by 2 gates, a tiger-safe metal entry gate leading into the paddock and a wooden gate with a timber fence to keep the public out. Nonetheless, the technique required zookeepers to examine the location of the tigers before entering. The tigers were then isolated in one of the sections distant from the paddock using guillotine-style, vertical tiger slides. The zookeepers had to double-check that the slides were in place before eventually entering the paddock. Rosa King was well aware of the process and had performed it thousands of times without incident. Nevertheless, unbeknownst to the woman, things were different this time, which eventually meant the difference between life and death. Rosa King walked into the paddock as usual. She left the wooden gate open, as many guardians did. The wooden gate, after all, couldn't keep the tigers out. That was the reason for the slides. In terms of Rose, knew the slide was in place, but there was one little element the woman was unaware of. The slide was in the open position. Why? Nobody knows for certain. It's probable that King left it open the night before and didn't know it until Monday morning, May 29, 2017. Therefore, despite understanding the protocol and the risks and worries, the 33-year-old woman approached the field past the wooden gate and through the metal gate. This strongly suggests she was unaware the slide was locked in the open position. Then King went to wipe the windows. That is why she came into the paddock in the first place. It was time for her to leave once she had cleaned the windows. She opened the metal gate, but she never made it out of the paddock because the Malayan tiger in the enclosure attacked her. Because there were no witnesses to the incident, no one knows for certain what occurred. Yet we know Rosa King was on her way out when the tiger attacked. The cloth and pail she'd used to clean the windows slipped from her grasp. Her damaged body then slumped to the cold, hard floor. ROSE, the king had died, with the zookeeper no longer alive. The tiger remained a serious threat. Both the metal and wooden gates were open. It may have simply strolled out of the enclosure and spread havoc, resulting in many more casualties. Families with children had already been welcomed to the zoo, but Sister, for the most part, never left the paddock. Around 11 a.m., a visitor named Frank Yorks noticed Rosa King's body and called 911. Staff members reacted swiftly. They shut the gates and tempted Sister away from the danger zone by throwing raw meat over the fence. The zoo was able to protect system life in this manner. Nevertheless, as it turned out, the zoo didn't have any conventional weaponry in the first place. The zoo relied on police officers to respond if a firearm was required to deal with an escaped animal. Obsessed escaped from the confinement. The zoo would have been unable to function properly and would have been forced to wait for police to arrive. All of these information was presented at an inquest on July 1, 2019. Rosa King had also endured horrific injuries, according to the inquest. A police inquiry revealed that the slides had no mechanical flaws. Together with its verdict of accidental death, the jury stated that the zoo's method was fully dependent on the keeper, who consistently followed their instruction. This suggests that the operation was certain to fail at some time due to human error. Rosa King's mother, Andre King, urged that people remember her daughter for who she was rather than what happened. Remember her for everything she'd done for the creatures under her care. She donated to conservation and animal welfare organizations. Her affection for all creatures. The woman also mentioned her love and support for family and friends. Since then, Hamerton Park Zoo has altered its safety procedures and implemented a new system for tiger keepers that keeps them in contact with a colleague as they accomplish each activity.